What does success mean to you? Do you consider yourself a successful person? What things should you bear in mind while you're climbing your own particular ladder of success? Those are questions we'll be talking about, hopefully successfully, on this week's podcast of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with over 50 years of successful teaching between us, we'll help you improve your grammar, your vocabulary, your phrasal verbs, your pronunciation, everything about your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm feeling well, Craig. Feeling fine and happy to be here, about to record a podcast with you, and then straight after that to get my reward of a very nice meal made by you, which is always a plus about recording at Craig's house.
Well, let's hope that the food is successful. Now, if you're a new listener joining us, you're very, very welcome. And if you've listened before and come back, thank you very much. This week, we're focusing on success. And before we discuss it, let's look at some vocabulary, some phrasal verbs, some idioms, expressions connected to success. What's the first one, Reza?
Well, the first bit of vocabulary that you want to link with success is probably the noun achievement, which comes from the verb to achieve, A-C-H-I-E-V-E. If you achieve something, that means you were successful. You did what you were supposed to do. And if you're a person who loves achieving things, you have a strong drive towards success, you want to be successful all the time, sometimes you get called an overachiever, a person who you could say perhaps is a bit obsessed with success.
Do you consider yourself an overachiever?
Definitely not. I like, and I'm going to repeat that, I like the idea of failing sometimes.
Why?
Because, first of all, whoever says they don't is a liar. That's the first thing.
Who doesn't fail?
Who says they don't. There may be people who fail and admit it, that's okay. But if there's anybody out there who says, oh no, I'm always successful, I think they're telling pork pies. I don't think everybody's always successful.
What's a pork pie? Something you eat, isn't it?
It can be. Or it can be British slang for a lie. So when I see these life coach type people saying, I'm absolutely always successful in everything I do. Really? Absolutely always? I'm not sure I buy it. 99% of the time. Perhaps, although I doubt it. But 100? Nah, I don't buy it.
I don't think, though, that's strictly speaking exactly what an overachiever is. I think an overachiever, in my opinion, is someone who has an A-type personality. It's someone who's very driven. You mentioned a strong drive to succeed. So maybe these people do fail and they accept the failure, but in their personality, there's something that keeps them pushing forward. They're never happy with where they are. They're constantly trying to get more money, a bigger house, a better job, climb that ladder and be more successful. So they're never really happy with where they are, and they're always working and focusing on the next thing, even though sometimes, they fail.
Yeah. That's true. So I definitely wouldn't call myself an overachiever, but I do like to achieve most things that I set out to do.
So you like to accomplish things in life?
Yeah, who doesn't? But you know what? A little bit of failure isn't the end of the world, but yeah, I do like to accomplish things.
So that's our next verb, to accomplish. You accomplish a goal, you accomplish things that you do in life. And the noun is accomplishment. Accomplishment. To see these words listed, go to the show notes. You can see those at inglespodcast.com/481.
Now, another word similar to accomplish is to attain something. Very often it collocates with the noun success. So you can achieve success or you can attain success. That's ATTAIN. And the noun from the verb attain is attainment.
Live long and prosper, said Dr. Spock in Star Trek, if you remember. Live long and prosper. To prosper, to do well in life, to be successful. The noun of prosper is prosperity. Prosperity.
Another very important word when you're talking about success is fulfill. If you are fulfilled, FULFILLED, if you're fulfilled in life, in other words, if you have a sense of fulfillment, that's the noun, then you have fulfilled your dreams. In other words, you've been successful.
So is success and fulfillment the same thing?
Not exactly, but I guess to feel successful, you need to fulfill your dreams first of all, I guess. I don't know, would you say so?
Yeah, I think you can be successful in the eyes of the world outside, people looking into your life, but then you don't feel fulfilled. You might be earning more money, you might have a nicer car, a bigger house, you might get promoted to a better position in your job, but you don't feel fulfilled. There's no fulfillment there, but you seem to be successful.
Yeah, I like your distinction. That's true. Because, of course, there have been many famous cases in history of people who seem to be amongst the most successful people in the world. I'm talking about top film stars, TV presenters, multimillionaires who have, ended up with depression, some even killing themselves, committing suicide, because clearly, I guess, they didn't feel fulfilled. I guess you're right, although they appear to be so successful.
Yeah, I think that's true very often of some very successful comedians. They're very funny, they're very successful, but they commit suicide because they lack that fulfillment in themselves. Let's move from looking at nouns and verbs to look at some phrasal verbs connected to success. Our first one is look up to, a 3-word phrasal verb. To look up to someone means to admire. Who do you look up to?
Are you talking about famous people?
Could be anyone. You could look up to someone in your family, someone you know personally. You could look up to a famous person. I look up to people who have kids, people who are very organized and have a family. I don't know how they do it. I really admire those kind of people. Reza, who do you look up to?
I really look up to my grandmother. As I mentioned in a previous episode, she was an extremely kind-hearted person. And kind-heartedness is one of the things I most look up to in people. These days it's very, very trendy, very fashionable, very in to look up to people who've achieved a lot in the world of technology. But I don't actually look up to them so much. I just think that more than anything, probably they were really successful businessmen or women.
I think that's what many people do look up to. I mean, I obviously look up to people who have kids and have families, people who have a very organized life despite having a family. But I also look up to people who have had success in tech companies, for example, as entrepreneurs.
Ah, right. Me too. As entrepreneurs. But I think there's a tendency these days to kind of just think, oh, if you've been a really successful entrepreneur in the world of technology, ignoring other types of entrepreneurs, oh, you must be amazing. But I think it's partly more to do with business sense almost. For example, listeners, do you really look up to the guy who invented internet? Can you remind me what his name is, listeners?
Berners-Lee?
Yeah, and you think all the listeners knew that?
Not all of them, some of them.
Some of them.
Probably people working in tech and technology, working in IT, they would know that.
Yeah.
Tim Berners-Lee.
There's a certain make of mobile phone, for legal reasons, probably best not to name it. And I would say it's the best mobile phones ever been invented. But is that more important than the invention of internet? Don't think so. For me, internet's more important. Yet, whose name do people remember more? The guy who invented that mobile phone and other devices, or the guy who invented internet? The guy who invented internet wasn't a good businessman. You see where I'm going with this?
Do you look up to him?
Yeah, tremendously. Far more than that inventor of the very famous mobile phone, of which I'm not an owner.
Steve Jobs, yeah.
Didn't say it. But people don't remember the poor guy's name who invented internet. Internet. You wouldn't be listening to us as listeners if it weren't for internet. You don't need to have an iPhone to listen to us, but you do need internet.
True.
That's my point. About more the business sense, people mix it up with the actual innovation. That's the bit that I don't get. It's like, oh, the owner of these really big companies, but the guy invented internet. Oh, wow. Well, what company did he own? None.
I think, though, I admire them and look up to them, these entrepreneurs and tech moguls who have made so much money because they had the drive to get where they wanted to go. We mentioned having a strong drive when we spoke about achievement. There's something driving them to be successful. That's what I admire, because I don't have it.
I don't have it, but I don't admire it that much either, strangely. A bit, but I think it gets over-exaggerated, if I'm honest. That doesn't sound like a very good start to an episode when you're talking about success, does it? But hey, you got to be honest.
So moving on to the next phrasal verb, I'm guessing that you settle for not being the best in your field, or you settle for not being especially successful. What does settle for mean?
If you settle for something, that means you accept that that's what's going to happen. Even though it's not ideal, perhaps, you accept it. Yeah, I think that's really important. Otherwise, you'll be really unhappy if you don't settle for what you've got, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's good not to settle sometimes for second best. If you settle for second best, then you're not striving or aiming for success. Another phrasal verb is to work towards something. We usually say work towards a goal in life or in your career, or work towards an aim or a target.
Hopefully, listeners, you are working towards the very important goal or aim of improving your English. What about to measure up to? How would you define that phrasal verb?
It's often used in a negative sentence. For example, he won't measure up to our expectations. He won't get to the level that we're expecting. So if someone measures up to your expectations, they will arrive at the level that you expect them to get to. Do you think this podcast will measure up to people's expectations?
Well, that's for our dear listeners to decide.
Before we discuss this topic in general, this idea of success, let's look at some idioms and expressions. The sky's the limit. What does that mean?
It's an expression which is very optimistic. Maybe you think it sounds pessimistic because you hear the word limit, but think about it. If the sky's the limit, that's a big limit. The sky's very far away. So the sky's the limit is basically saying there is no limit. You can do whatever you like. Just keep going up and up and up and up into the sky.
Don't let anything stop you or prevent you from being successful. And a similar expression to that is to reach for the stars, to reach, to try and grab or get or hold the stars so far away. That is where you are aiming. Reach for the stars.
Another nice one is fortune favors the brave. So if you're brave, in other words, if you take risks, if you've got drive to be successful, you'll probably be fortunate because fortune favors. It's helpful to the brave.
Another idiom we can use is to rise to the occasion. So if you rise to the occasion, then you get a challenge in life that you meet. You meet the challenge. Maybe you think you don't have the the abilities to do something or the ability to get there, but you push yourself and you rise to the challenge or rise to the occasion. Reza, can you think of a time when you didn't rise to the occasion?
Yes, one evening when I was quite young and I was trying to chat up a nice young lady.
What does chat up mean?
To chat up is to talk to someone with the objective of having an amorous relationship with them, a romantic relationship. So I was chatting up this girl and I seemed to be successful. And we went back to my house.
So what exactly didn't rise to the occasion?
Well, I don't want to go into details, but this girl was expecting a certain treatment from me, and precisely because I had drunk too many beers to get me brave enough to talk to her, I felt that this affected my behavior, and I was unable to rise to the occasion, and she felt very disappointed.
Yeah, I can imagine. Our next idiom is to be a success story. That's a very common collocation. A success story. For example, we hope that this podcast is a success story. We've got thousands of listeners after working hard for so many years. I think we can comfortably and confidently say that this podcast is and has been a success story.
Yes, that's one I want to comment on specifically for Spanish speakers, but it might actually be the same for Portuguese. I'm not sure. But Spanish speakers, you're thinking of that word suceso. Ah, yeah, that causes a lot of problems, that false friend. Sometimes you see in newspapers sucesos, which just means news stories. It's very confusing for Spanish speakers when they see or hear success story. What? Success? Okay, suceso? No, it's not. Success, of course, is éxito, which is my next point, not exit. Exit is the way out. And success is not a story. Success is getting what you want. So Spanish people often get confused by the expression success story. They think it means a story in a newspaper.
And if you have a success story or you are a success story, you can say that you have made it big. To make it big or to hit the big time, we can say. For example, when Antonio Banderas listens to this podcast, we can say that we've made it big. Do you think he does? Do you think he listens to this podcast, Antonio?
I don't know, but if you do, Antonio, un abrazo y muchas gracias.
And send us a voice message. That will help our download numbers. So let's dive into this topic after we've introduced a few vocabulary items and talk about success. What does success mean to you, Reza, and how would you define success?
Well, I think rather than ask me, I'm going to use other people's knowledge because I think we should try and present it in a more structured way than what I could offer. So I tell you what if we break it down into categories?
That sounds like a good idea. What's the first one?
Let's start with success in your career. In other words, your professional life. Remember, your career is what you do as a profession. It's not what you do at university. That would be your degree. Okay, so your career and your professional life. Well, the first thing that people often talk about is the ability to climb the corporate ladder. In other words, you start with a not very important job, probably not well paid, and not many people know about you, but then you get a better job after a few years, and a better job, and a better job, and who knows, you might end up in the board of directors or as the CEO of a company.
So a ladder, you could also say steps. If you live in a house and you need to get on the roof, you probably cannot get there by yourself. You need a ladder to climb up. And in the same way, idiomatically, you're climbing the ladder in your career. That is definitely not true for me. I have never tried to climb a corporate ladder. The next one in the area of career and professional life will be achieving financial independence. What's that? Well, that's really not having to work or depend on other people to pay your living expenses. So you can live, you can pay your bills, everything in life that you want to do, you can do it, and you don't need to work or have any other income in order to do it. So you are financially independent. Are you there yet?
Yes, I reckon I became financially independent, more or less, perhaps not 100%, but nearly at about the age of 24, 25.
No, that's not it. It's when you only work because you want to. Like, you don't need to work to pay anything.
Oh,
It's
right.
so early retirement, you can think of it like that.
Okay.
But you're not getting retirement paid by the government.
Oh, I
You've
thought
got
you meant,
your
like,
own money.
depending on somebody else.
But it could mean that.
Yeah.
It could mean that. But in here, it's more like you don't need to. I mean, that's success, isn't it? You can stop working at 50 because you've got enough money invested or in the bank, and you don't need to work anymore.
Oh, well, I'm a far cry away from that. I'm nowhere near that yet.
You're crying.
Yeah. No, I'm not crying, but I am a far cry. If you're a far cry from somewhere, it means you're not near. You're not near yet. What about you?
No, I still have to work to pay the bills. But financial independence for some people is one way to define success. If you can stop working when you're 50 or 45 years old and you don't need to work, you don't need to rely on your parents or your wife or your husband to support you financially, then you're financially independent. And the next one in this category of professional life and career is making a significant impact in your field, in your work, what you do for a living. So some people, if they're working in the field of science, for example, and this is an extreme example, maybe you get the Nobel Prize. Well, that's success, isn't it? Or maybe you get to be the CEO of your company. Or maybe you write a book that impacts other people. So you're making a significant impact in your area, in your career. And I like to think, maybe not a significant impact, but I like to think with the people that we help, not only with this podcast, but they pay us to teach classes. So I like to think that we're helping people and we are impacting people's lives. I mean, we've had people who have contacted us to say they've passed an exam and they thank us for helping them. They've got a promotion in their job. They have got a job. So having that impact on other people, I think that might be true for us. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I hope you're right. And above all, we'd love to get any feedback from listeners saying how perhaps this podcast has had an impact in a positive way on your life. Please do get in touch and let us know anything at all you want to talk about, which refers to the impact of this podcast on your life. We'd love to hear from you.
And of course, we'll include it in a future episode. Let's move on to personal life, success in personal life. What areas could we look at there, Reza?
Well, perhaps the most obvious thing is maintaining healthy relationships. Although I guess there are probably differences in opinion about what is healthy, but good relationships. So we're talking about with your friends, your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, if you've got one, your relatives. Having a healthy relationship with them, I think most people would agree, is key to success in your personal life.
And having a large social circle, I think, having a group of friends that you enjoy being with, I think that's been shown to increase happiness, to have those social connections. The next one is achieving a work-life balance. So balancing your work that brings in the money with your family life and friends and relaxation. Do you feel successful with this?
I feel fairly successful, not bad. In the last couple of years, I feel that the balance has been too much towards work and not sufficiently towards my personal life. But on the whole, not bad. But maybe it helps if you're not much of an overachiever, as I'm not. Then I guess it's easier to get a fairly good work-life balance. What about you?
I think you are better at this than I am. I don't really have a good work-life balance. I think I work far too much and I don't spend enough time cultivating social relationships, seeing friends, socializing. I need to work more on that side, and also health, because health leads to happiness as well. So I need to look at the work-life balance and try and focus more time on other things other than work.
It's a thing I find fascinating when I think about American culture. I mean, the United States in the 21st century. Generalizing, but on the whole, it would appear that in most Western European countries, people, on the whole, do have a better work-life balance than the United States. And yet the United States is still the strongest economy in the world. It's true there is poverty, as there is in all countries, but there's a heck of a lot of wealth as well. But, Americans don't get that many holidays compared to Western Europeans. They work a lot. And I reckon they could seriously improve their work-life balance. I reckon in Western Europe, we've done a better job than the Americans. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the American culture is very much work, 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 and they don't have much free time and definitely don't have as much holiday time, vacation time, as they would say, than we do here in Europe. Another area is fulfilling our personal goals and aspirations. Remember, you can see all of these notes in the show notes, inglespodcast.com/481. So this is something I'm also not very good at. I'm terrible. I'm good at setting goals for success, but I'm not very good at achieving them or hitting my goals or my aspirations, the things I aspire to, the things I would like to achieve. What about you?
I think I get the feeling that I probably set fewer goals than you. Therefore, there's less chance of anything going wrong. But there's also less chance of things going right because I haven't set as many goals. I'm not as much as a goal setter as you, I reckon.
But it doesn't matter if I'm not achieving them, because what am I doing if I'm not achieving the goals I set? It's silly even to set them if I hardly ever achieve them. Do you not set goals because you're afraid of not achieving them?
Probably deep down, yes. That's probably one of the reasons. And the other reason is because I just want an easy life. I don't like the idea of the stress, the pressure to achieve that goal. If you haven't set any goal, well, nothing can go wrong, right?
The easy way to relieve the stress is not to achieve them. Another area is success in mental and emotional well-being. So how do you feel in yourself mentally and emotionally? And the first area is overcoming challenges and adversities. So those are things that are difficult in your life, difficulties that you come across, barriers, problems that you need to overcome or solve. And I think I've been very lucky in this area. I haven't had many challenges and adversities in life. And unfortunately, the death of my parents and family members, that was very difficult. But apart from that, I haven't had many. What about you?
I think I've been quite lucky as well. I feel particularly sorry for people who've had to try to overcome challenges to do with their health, above all, be that mental health or physical health. And I'm not the healthiest person in the world, but I'm okay. I'm relatively lucky. I consider myself fortunate.
That's good news. Cultivating resilience and self-awareness is another area. So resilience is how well you come back after bad things happen, or we could say bounce back like a ball. If you bounce back with enthusiasm and with a lot of drive to continue life and continue achieving, you are very resilient. And cultivating that resilience is developing that resilience to problems in life. And also self-awareness, knowing yourself, who are you, is also important. Any comments?
Yes, I would add something to that. A third point, which is kind of related to that point, finding inner peace and happiness. I don't think you can find inner peace if you're not, first of all, self-aware. You've got to know who you are to be able to find that inner peace. And it sounds a bit silly, perhaps, or a bit fanciful, a bit airy-fairy.
Airy-fairy.
Not keeping my feet on the ground, not being scientific.
Unrealistic.
But I think a lot of people don't fully know who they are themselves. And if you aren't fully self-aware, I don't think you can ever find 100% inner peace.
I think that's very true. So there we've broken down success. Maybe this helps a bit to break down success in order to define if we're successful. So we had success in career and personal life, and then success in our personal lives, and finally mental and emotional success and well-being. Now let's look at some strategies for actually achieving and attaining success and getting there. What can we do, Reza?
Well, before I start talking about it, warning, Craig and I are not experts in this, so don't think that just by listening to this podcast, suddenly you'll be successful in everything you do, if only. But we just try to give you advice with the aim to improving your English above all. But we are not experts in creating success in people. Just thought
maybe the opposite, actually.
Yeah, maybe.
If you want to know how to fail,
ask us. We know a thing or two about that. Well, the first thing I would say, and many people would agree, I think, is to set goals and plan. Although, I repeat what I said earlier, not too many. In my opinion, it's a bad idea if you overdo goal setting and planning. Don't do it too much, but yes, I think you definitely need some goals and some plans in life, but as long as they're realistic. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, with me, that's very much work in progress. So I think it's a good idea to be realistic about your goal setting, definitely. And also be consistent. So consistency, perseverance, to persevere, to keep going, determination, to be determined to achieve your goals. Those three things, those three qualities, I think are very important for success. Perseverance, consistency, and determination.
If it helps you, think of the old saying in English, if at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. You've got to be determined. It's
also important to continue to learn and adapt according to the current situation. So continuous learning, adaptation, being open to change. Now, we experienced COVID a while ago, which needed us to be flexible, to be adaptable, to learn new things. And now we're hearing lately on the news, AI, artificial intelligence. Again, we need to learn, we need to adapt, we need to change. So I think these qualities are important on the road to success.
Another thing which is very important is to build up a supportive network. And I mean that in two ways. Build up one around yourself. So help other people, be nice to other people, be considerate. And then when the time comes that you need their help, they'll help you. But also make sure that you form a supportive network around other people. So it's got to be reciprocal. No one's going to go out of the way to help you if they know that you're not going to go out of your way to help them. So build up supportive mutual networks of people that you know are going to try to help you to be successful. And you're going to try and help them to be successful.
Yes, a network of like-minded people. And there's another compound adjective from last week's podcast, like-minded, people who are similar to you. By the way, if you want to learn more compound adjectives, go listen to last week's podcast, which was episode 480. What else is there, Reza, on the list?
Well, the last but not least on the list that we have is maintaining a positive mindset. Really, hopefully, that should be obvious. If you're not positive, the chances of success are virtually zero. If you don't really think that you can succeed, there isn't that much chance of you succeeding. You've got to believe that you can do it, and then there's a good chance that you'll do it. But if you don't believe it, there's virtually no chance that you'll be successful. Would you agree?
I would. Would you consider yourself an optimist in that respect?
I consider myself a mixture of a realist and an optimist. I'm not a pessimist, but I'm not the best optimist in the world. I mix it with a bit of realism. What about you?
Probably the same, actually. Yeah. I like to be positive as often as I can and maintain a positive mindset. But yeah, I am also a realist.
Well, tell me, Craig, have you ever had a significant setback or failure in your life? And if you have, how did you bounce back from it?
That's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind recently, as far as work's concerned, was the course I created for the B2 First, which, as you know, took me 6 months to create the videos and the backup material. And then I put it on a course website, a course platform. And although people who have taken the course have passed the exam, for the most part, that they've said that they found the course very useful and it's been successful, it didn't sell as much as I'd hoped. So although I don't consider it a complete failure, I did have to adapt and change. And that goes back to strategies. So being positive and being able to adapt, then I started focusing more on conversation, which seems to be more interesting to people. So that could be an example of a recent setback. What about you?
A very big setback in my life was when I realized when I was about 21 years old, more or less, that my dream of being a professional musician was probably over because I had a lot of trouble with my wrist, and it still gives me trouble to this day. And I played the violin and a few other instruments, but really the violin was my thing, and I couldn't any longer play the way that I had before. And it was a very, very hard thing to bounce back from. But my comeback meant converting myself into an English teacher. So here I am, voila. So from one failure can come a success in another way.
And you did adapt because you did play the violin as a hobby.
Yeah, that's true. I have kept it up, although really I don't play very well, but I haven't entirely given it up. So it was difficult, but I think I did just about bounce back from it, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Now, Craig, you mentioned strategies earlier, strategies to help you. And as I'm sure all the listeners know, there's a lot of self-help books there with strategies about how to be successful. And I can see a lot of advantages to them. But one thing I think as a negative criticism of them, if it's so easy to achieve things, success, if it's easily achievable, how come there's so many different books about it then? Everybody seems to have different ideas about how to do it. If it's so easy, shouldn't there just be one book? What do you think about that?
But what makes you think it's so easy? I think the fact that it's not easy means that there are so many books available on the market because so many people are looking for answers and how to get to success because they're not finding it. So I don't think it's easy to be successful in those areas that we've mentioned. And I'll add one more thing. Many of the self-help books that I've read and that are on the market, and I've read a lot because I'm quite interested in this area, even though it's not really helping me. But a lot of them are rubbish. A lot of them don't have a very useful message, and very often they're copies of other books. But I will mention 3 that I think are very useful. One that I have read and reread, and I really think is a good book, is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. So that's one book that if you're interested in this area, I think it's good for you to read. And the second one that focuses more on productivity rather than success, but obviously productivity leads to success, is Getting Things Done by David Allen. So if you're not an organized person and you want to get organized, go and read that book. And also Developing Habits, Atomic Habits by James Clear is a very, very good book. And also his website and email lists are very useful. James Clear. And another mention, apart from those three, an honorary mention. A couple of weeks ago, Bree talked on this podcast about Charles Duhigg. That was back in episode 476. Now, Duhigg's written two really good books that I've read, and I recommend Smarter, Faster, Better, that Bree recommends on the podcast, The Secrets of Being Productive in Life and Business, and the second book, The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. So I think habits and creating good habits are really important to developing success in anything. I've also included a link in the show notes to an interesting list I found, which was the 33 best self-help books of all time to read at any age. Now, I don't know if they are the best of all time, but there were many on that list that are good recommendations. And what I liked about the list is that depending on your age, you'll find books there that are applicable, that apply to your stage in life. Because I think success changes as we get older, our definition of success. So to see those recommendations and the link, go to inglespodcast.com/481. And speaking of success, how successful do you think you are when it comes to your speaking in English? Is your fluency improving? Are you happy with your speaking skills? My conversation course focuses on making you a more confident and more fluent English speaker. You'll join me and a small group of motivated students, and together we'll meet on Zoom and have topical discussions, role plays, debates and presentations that will help you to expand your vocabulary and express yourself effectively in English. So be proactive and take the first step towards becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Send me an email today to Craig, Craig, @inglespodcast.com, and I'll send you details of the next online conversation course. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the podcast and the topic of success.
You said that your idea of success can change over the years. What about your definition of success? How has that evolved over the years, Craig?
Well, in my younger years, it was mainly girls. So my definition of success was having a girlfriend, first of all. And it was very focused on things like that, going out, being popular with my mates, with my friends. And then there was a period when I got a bit into my 20s of finding the meaning of life and being successful in how I understood why I'm here. And then I started teaching, so success in teaching became important. And now I have no idea. I don't know what success is. Maybe financial freedom, financial independence, like we spoke about before. What about you?
Yes, my definition of success has changed over the years as well. Like yourself, I put a lot of importance into being successful with romantic relationships in the past, and I still do, but now with a different focus, more on the aspect of happiness rather than just the aspect of, well, did you chat her up or not? I realize that that's not really a good indicator of success. And Craig, do you think success can go to your head? It's a very common expression. People say, oh, he thinks he's great now just because he's been successful. It's gone to his head. He thinks he's brilliant now. Has success ever gone to your head?
So to go to your head means to inflate your ego, to think that you are wonderful, to start boasting and telling people that you're fantastic. Well, I like to think it hasn't. I don't know, I suppose maybe in a small way, but I can't think of any situation where it has. No. What about you?
Again, I go back to my younger days, and on the rare occasions when I was successful with the ladies, I think it probably went to my head, because after a very short time, I soon became unsuccessful again. So I learned to not let it get to my head.
Final question. Would you prefer to reach the end of your life thinking you'd achieved everything or nearly everything you'd set out and intended to achieve, but not being liked by people, or the reverse, not achieving your objectives, but being liked by people?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a very good question. And I'm going to give you a not very good answer. A bit of a mixture, I guess.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, probably somewhere in the middle.
I'd like to have both. I'd like to be really successful and liked by everybody, but I guess that's tricky. A mixture, yeah? Would you say the same?
Yeah, I would. Somewhere in the middle. Not to be hated, and also maybe to achieve something in life. But what does success mean for you? We've spoken about what it means for us in different areas, and we've looked at some vocabulary and helpful expressions. So now it's your turn to use them. Tell us what your version of success is, what it means to you, and how will you know if you've achieved success? You can do this by sending us a voice message. Go to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. There's a link in the show notes. And emails, Reza?
If you are too shy to send a voice message, or you're unsuccessful in your attempts to record one, you could write to us. Write to Craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
This podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. Why don't you visit the online store and take a look at the courses we have available for sale there? Go to store.mansioningles.net.
As always, a big thank you to all the people who are helping us by supporting the podcast with donations through the Patreon scheme. If you'd like to find out more about the scheme, have a look at the link in the show notes, patreon.com/Ingles podcast, which will explain to you how you could, for as little as $1.50 per month, make a donation to us. And as a thank you to you, we will give you audio transcriptions of the podcast.
And unfortunately, we don't have time to mention all of you by name, but we will say hello and welcome to our latest Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. They are Cristina Rato and Tarabello. Thank you to you and to everybody who continues to sponsor us and make this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends. And Reza, do we know what we're talking about next week?
I'm afraid we've been unsuccessful in thinking of an episode for next week, but we're on it. We will think of something.
So in order to continue the success of this podcast, please tell us what you'd like to hear, and we will do our best to create a podcast for you. Thank you for listening this week. Have a wonderful week. Until next time, it's goodbye from Reza.
And bye-bye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.